Hi there, I've just put together a quick video to talk through how to answer these notes on Berlin blockade as part of our Cold War topic. So the first thing we need to really think about is, why is Germany kind of a relevant factor in the Cold War? Why is it going to be an area of tension? The key thing to this is really the first question that you've got here, asking, what happened to Germany at the end of World War II? So you remember what we looked at when we did the Yalta conference, that one of the decisions that was made is that once Nazi Germany was defeated, Germany was going to be divided in between four different countries, and you can see them here. So you've got Britain, you've got the USSR, you've got America, and you've got France, and these four sections are literally where they've divided Germany up as a country between them. So that's the decision that's made about Germany. So you've got this Soviet section, and then you've got these kind of Western sections here. Okay, so the point about this as well is, when we look at the Berlin blockade, it's looking at where Berlin is within Germany, and this bit here is Berlin. So the point about here is that Berlin is in the Soviet section, it's in the USSR section, and of course America, Britain and France aren't very happy about that. They don't want the Soviets to have complete control over the capital. So what they also decide to do is they split Berlin in four as well. So when you look actually on the PowerPoint that we've got here for you, if I zoom in a bit, you can see Berlin, we've also got these four sections within it. So this is Berlin here, and then again you've got the USSR's section within itself, and then you've got USA, France and Britain. So this, what we call kind of West Berlin, the western side of Berlin with Britain, France and the USA, is buried deep in the heart of the Soviet section of Germany more generally. And that really leaves it vulnerable to Stalin easily deciding he might want to take control of all of Berlin for himself and for the USSR. So that's what's significant about the position of Berlin, is that it's within the Soviet section. So, West Berlin is very vulnerable, okay? The West Berlin that America and Britain have control of is very vulnerable, okay? So part of the reason we have this Berlin blockade is the Cold War, which we've been talking about, and Stalin is taking over Eastern Europe, and it's taking more and more control. And also within Germany specifically, the USSR basically wants to destroy Germany, as the notes say here. It wants to completely destroy all of its wealth. Whereas on the flip side, America wants to rebuild it to make it really strong and wealthy and a really good trading partner. And what we get therefore is, when you need to see here that the sheet talks about these difference in aims for Germany. And this is going to be a really kind of underlying cause of the Berlin blockade. And because their policy towards this region that they kind of have split between them is so different, war is going to kind of break out sooner or later. So when we go through the rest of these sheets, actually where it says from the information above, why does Stalin decide to blockade Berlin? Well, all of that information can be found there. Well, one of the reasons we've just talked about is these, disagreements about what to do with Germany generally, okay? And the fact that they have different approaches. And we've talked about Stalin wanting to be quite cruel, whereas the USA wanting to kind of build Germany up. And then the kind of actions that follow that do lead to this blockade. Remember, the blockade is when he completely splits and kind of cuts off any US access or any British access to West Germany by train or by road. So one of the first things that the Americans do is, in January 1947, Britain and the USA join their two zones together. So in this little West Berlin section here, the American and British sections join together, and this place becomes known as Bizonia. And what that kind of does is make that region quite strong, and the Russians don't like this. The USSR is very nervous about this. They feel that they're being ganged up on a little bit, and that section of Germany will be made quite strong, which obviously the USSR doesn't want. So the next reason we're looking at here is this formation of Bizonia, and the USSR feeling a bit threatened by this. And that, West Berlin, or this Bizonia really, might be stronger than it would like it to be. So Bizonia should be going in there. The next thing we want to have a look at then, if I do it in a different colour, is in March 48 we've talked about the Marshall Plan. Okay, so this is the money. I think it was $17 billion that has been put aside to give to Europe. What they do, Stalin sees this as America trying to get rid of Russian influence in Eastern Europe, which it absolutely is. So this Marshall Aid money starts to go to West Berlin. And what that does is really make the American section quite prosperous. They start to do very well, and the American and British sections, because they've got this money pouring in from America. And again, the Soviet Union does not like that. They really feel threatened by this. They feel like Germany's going to get too strong, and they don't want that to happen. They really don't want a strong Berlin. The final thing that happens is in June. If I do that in one more colour. In June, they introduce a new currency into Bisonia, and all these people changed their money to this new currency, which they thought was worth more. They thought it was a stronger currency. So this new currency is really what we want to talk about here, because that makes West Berlin and West Germany much more financially, wealthy, and this is exactly what the USSR doesn't want. So immediately on the back of this decision, the next day after this currency is introduced, the Russians stop all road traffic and all rail traffic, so anything by car or van or train, they stop that coming in to Berlin. And this is what we call the blockade, when they literally cut West Berlin off from the rest of Germany. They completely cut it off, and it's kind of left on its own. So, when we think about why this is quite a clever plan, well, one, the idea is that it removes US or British influence, in theory, if it had worked, because they wouldn't be allowed to bring anything in by boat. Sorry, not by boat, but by train or by car. But it avoids a war. He hasn't launched an attack, in theory. He's just cut off their supplies. So it puts America in quite a difficult position. What can the US actually do to try and help or to try and save West Berlin? It doesn't look like they've got very many options. Okay, but the USA come up with a really clever plan, and that clever plan is what we call the airlift. So they can't go by car, they can't go by train, all of those routes have been blocked, so they decide to go by plane. Okay, and this is where in this section here you need to give some details of this airlift, where essentially they use planes to lift supplies over into West Berlin. So if I draw it on the map here, what they basically do is have all their supplies kind of marked here, and normally they'd have just brought them to West Berlin by one of these kind of roads or trains, but they're not allowed to anymore. They've all been blocked off. So what they do is they fly them in using planes. I won't draw a plane, and that's the airlift that they use. So what you need to do is a few more details on this. You need to use in your book page 34, and also you were given a fact sheet with some facts and figures, where you can find a bit more detail on it there. So you should be able to find out kind of what they do, thinking about how many, what supplies do they bring in, what types of planes. So I think at the peak it's 4,000 tons of supplies of coal and stuff are coming in every single day. So what we need to look at is, once America has done this airlift, or what are the main outcomes of it? And again, this information can be found on page 34 and 35. First thing to have a look at with that is that Stalin lifts the blockade. He sees, his plan hasn't worked. America has still got the supplies in. So you need to look a little bit more about how Stalin lifts the blockade. What happened as well is, after this blockade, we talked about Bisonia. Okay, and that was the US and the British ones, but now we get France joining in, and all three western sections join to form a place called the Federal Republic of Germany. Okay, and this is what we now call, what becomes known as West Germany. So we get split in two. So we get a brand new democratic German country in West Germany. Okay, so that's really important because on the flip side, in East Germany, we get a brand new country as well called the German Democratic Republic, and this we kind of now call East Germany. Okay, so we've now got two brand new countries Germany's been split into: the Federal Republic of Germany, which is the kind of US side of things, and then on the flip side of that we've got the German Democratic Republic, which is the Soviet side of things. So we've got these brand new, Germany is literally split in two. The final thing that comes out of this is kind of two new formal alliances across the world, really. In 1949, there were 12 countries joined something called NATO, okay, which is the North Atlantic Treaty, which basically says if any of us are attacked, all of us will come to their defence. And it's basically a defensive alliance against the USSR. And then on the flip side of that, so that is something that the US join. And then after that, in 1955, the Soviet Union creates something called the Warsaw Pact, which is again similarly what they consider a defensive alliance because they saw NATO as a bit of a threat against them. So we've got two clear alliances now, two clear kind of spheres of the world, and that is one of the kind of outcomes of this Berlin blockade after we've seen Germany divided in two. So hopefully that's going to be a little bit clearer about what the Berlin blockade actually is, kind of the reasons for it, the different approaches that they had to Germany, and the USSR fearing the economy of West Germany and West Berlin getting stronger, so they launched this blockade to try and weaken West Berlin and kind of take it for their own. But obviously the American airlift is a kind of really clever, cunning plan that means that West Berlin still survives, that it gets all the supplies that it needs, and eventually Stalin is forced to kind of cave in and lift this blockade. And on the back of that, we end up with a totally divided Germany, two new countries, East Germany and West Germany. So hopefully that's been helpful and kind of clarified some stuff if we weren't sure, and kind of given you an idea of how to fill in those notes. If you've got any questions, just get in touch.